Welcome in, everybody. Before we get started, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. You know, all the YouTubey things. Forget what you think you know about justice. Welcome to the Virtual Juror, where snark is reality, but evidence is royalty. Where at first we look at the FACS, or Facts and Conjecture Shared, before we get into the real stuff. Today opened with the attorneys immediately going to Sidebar. It took over 30 minutes. Who knows what they were discussing? But it was a late start for the jury today, and none of it was put on the record. We started the day with Commonwealth Witness 31, Matthew Sheehan, still on the stand, under cross-examination. He's the man responsible for turning the Walshe family basement into a crime scene diagram that looks like a Jackson Pollock painting, if Pollock worked exclusively in red sauce. This poor CSI guy had to explain that the white powder wasn't overly inflammatory, but the blood in the basement is definitely not marinara sauce. He testified about the absolute cornucopia of blood evidence found downstairs, on rugs, on a hacksaw, and on a hammer. Sheehan may be regretting his career choice, as the defense played a rousing game of, but what about this speck? The defense was obsessed with a white powder residue on a rug, which Sheehan recalls as being baking soda. Groundbreaking stuff. They also pointed out that Brian had unopened hydrogen peroxide in the cabinet. Proof, surely, that an eliminator would obviously use all the cleaning supplies in the house, leaving none behind for a rainy day. The defense then tried to gaslight the courtroom about the blood evidence, suggesting that since the Serotek test is super sensitive, maybe it was just a tiny bit of blood. Sheehan politely shut that down, explaining that cleaning agents dilute samples, so a positive result after a bleach scrub is actually pretty damning. The cross-examination devolved into a procedural headache about field notes and discoloration that Sheehan hadn't seen, leading to a game of sidebar ping-pong that clearly annoyed the judge. The defense's finale, trying to argue that the human hair found might not be human. Sheehan basically said, "I observed the root. It's human." And that the bloody tools were victims of cross-contamination, as if DNA just floats around the room like pollen. For the prosecution, they played this like a drum solo. They didn't just show a bloody tool. They showed a Lowe's catalog of bloody tools. Sheehan held up well. The prosecution is effectively painting Brian as a guy who decided to do some light renovations on his wife, using the basement as his personal workshop of horrors. Their argument is simple. You don't accidentally get your wife's blood on the inside of a Tyvek suit unless you're having a very, very bad New Year's Day. The defense did their best to turn the basement into a mystery room. His strategy was the legal hypothetical of asking, but did you see him do it? He hammered, pun intended, on the fact that the bedroom was cleaner than a hospital operating room. They're also trying to rely on the sloppy cop defense by focusing on untestable powders, unopened bottles, and theoretical contamination. They're trying to create doubt about the integrity of the crime scene. If they can make the jury believe the lab is messy, maybe they can ignore the DNA results. Also, by highlighting the pristine upstairs, the defense is trying to sell the jury on the sudden explained death theory, suggesting that Anna just politely passed away of natural causes, and Brian, well, the defense gets a bit fuzzy on why he then decided to dispose of her, but they're leaning hard into the panic angle. Witnesses 31 through 39 were the DNA assembly line. We heard from Bryce Raymond, Brianna Kiesel, Madison Frank, Troy Adams, Emily Oliver, Mary Nagle, no relation to Joli Nagle, Joli Bregu, Karin Jacobsen, and Katarina Stashyn. They're all forensic scientists twos with the Massachusetts State Police. The backup dancers of the forensic world, without whom we don't get here. Each performed at least one step of the testing process, proving that forensic science is just really a high-stakes relay race. These scientists testified about the nitty-gritty details of other items, like the slippers, the Tyvek suit, and the rugs. It was a repetitive, albeit necessary, slog of I received item A, I tested item A was gross. If you ever wondered how many people it takes to screw in a light bulb, test a bloody hacksaw. The answer is the entire Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab. The Commonwealth marched out 9 different witnesses who essentially said, I picked up the tube, I spun the tube, I handed the tube to the next guy. For Bryce and Brianna, they're the prep cooks. They got the samples ready from the hacksaw, the slippers, and the Tyvek suit. Madison, Troy, Emily, Mary, and Joli, they were the assembly line. Extraction, quantification, amplification, detection. It was a blur of science jargon and acronyms. For Karin and Katarina, they're the reference librarians. They handled the known DNA samples from Brian and Anna, courtesy of the FBI, just to make sure we knew what DNA sample belonged to who. The defense asked almost 0 questions because, honestly, what are you going to ask? Did you pipette with malice? For the prosecution, this was a chain of custody flex, built on volume. They buried the jury in science. It was boring, dry, but absolutely necessary. By parading every technician, they were bulletproofing the evidence against claims of tampering or mishandling. But having expert after expert confirm that every single thing Brian bought at Lowe's was used for exactly what the Google search, how to dispose of a body, suggested, they're building a wall of evidence that may prove impossible to traverse for the defense. It's death by 1,000 swabs. The defense team may have used this time to catch up on some much-needed paperwork, or maybe took a nap with their eyes open. There isn't much gotcha to be had with a guy who tests swatches. Their strategy here was likely damage control. Keep the cross-examination short, or mostly non-existent. Don't let the jury dwell on the gore, and try to hurry the trial along to a witness they can actually argue with. They want to move the narrative away from the cleanup, which was damning, and back to the cause of death, which seems to be their only hope. There's no mileage in attacking standard operating procedures unless you catch a glaring error. They saved their energy for the results. Commonwealth witness number 40 was Saman Saleem, Massachusetts State Police Forensic Scientist 3. Miss Saleem took the stand to drop the kind of math that makes your high school calc teacher weep for joy. She analyzed the biological material found on the items of interest, legal speak for elimination weapons. Her headline moment was revealing which items contained DNA that matched to Anna Walshe and which items contained DNA that matched to Brian Walshe, and not just a maybe match at that when it came to Anna. She was the closer, the one who finally looked at the jury and effectively said, yeah, that's Anna's blood on the hacksaw, and the hatchet, and inside Brian's hazmat suit. In at least one of these results, it was 30 nonillion times more likely to be Anna's DNA than anyone else's. For those keeping score at home, nonillion is a number with 30 zeros. It's the kind of number you use to count stars, or the national debt, not suspects. After hours of buildup, Saman Saleem dropped the forensic bomb. The results were catastrophic for Brian's "I just went to get ice cream" defense. In the Swampscott dumpster, the unknown tissue, the hacksaw blade and handle, the white towel, apparent hairs, piece of rug from bag 5, and the hatchet head confirmed Anna's DNA. Single contributor. No ambiguity. In the Tyvek suit, inside the cuff, a mix of Anna and Brian, because nothing says innocent like wearing a protective suit that has your wife's blood on the inside of the sleeve. And on the gauze and tape, Brian's DNA. Apparently, dismemberment is prone to workplace accidents. The defense tried to grasp at a straw involving a third contributor on a slipper, the elusive mystery guest, which honestly, if you have kids, you know they put your slippers on, so it could be one of the boys, and asked hypothetical questions about DNA transfer. If I touch a hacksaw, does my DNA get on it? Possibly. If I squeeze it really hard? Yeah, probably. But none of that explains why Anna's DNA is on a hacksaw in a dumpster. For the prosecution, this was the mic drop moment. By attaching a number like 39 million to the evidence, they effectively erased any "it wasn't Anna" doubts. They used her testimony to scientifically weld the victim to the tools found in the dumpsters Brian visited. It removes the abstraction. This isn't just blood. It's mathematically, indisputably Anna. These results directly link Brian to the disposal of Anna's body. The mixture on the Tyvek suit places him in the suit, handling the bloody remains. It destroys the "she just left" narrative. As the defense, what do you even do with 30 nonillion? The defense was trying to argue against a calculator. Their best bet was to pivot back to how the DNA got there, rather than whose it was. They did try to suggest that secondary transfer is a thing. Well, it is. But against a statistical wall, they looked like they were trying to put out a forest fire with a water pistol. Their only real play here was to separate the act of dismemberment, which the DNA now seems to prove, from the act of elimination, which they claim didn't happen. It seems like a weak choice, but it's the only card they have left against hard science. Sure, he cut her up, they seem to be saying, but he didn't kill her. Let's see if this reach for the stars strategy pays off. The last witness of the day was Commonwealth Witness 41, Michael Roddy. He works for Home Goods in loss prevention. Brian is the cheapest villain in history. He used his missing wife's store credit to buy replacement supplies to tidy up after her elimination. Just when you thought it couldn't get grimmer, in walks Michael Roddy of Home Goods. It turns out Anna had returned some items in late December, racking up store credit. And then on January 2nd, Brian rolls into Home Goods and buys 3 large rugs and a candle. For the smell, presumably. And then on January 4th, he goes back for towels and bath mats. Crucially, he paid using the store value cards from Anna's returns. Yup. He allegedly killed his wife and then used her own refund money to buy the rugs to replace the one that was allegedly bled on. That is a level of frugal audacity that almost defies belief. For the prosecution, this establishes the cleanup timeline and speaks to a cold, calculating mindset. Replacing rugs and towels immediately after she vanishes, using her refund credits, makes Brian appear sociopathic and practical, not a grieving husband. The defense tried to confuse the issue by asking where the returns originated, D.C. or Massachusetts, and pointing out that there are no videos of these transactions where the refunds were generated. But it was a swing and a miss. The point isn't where the credit came from, the point is what he bought with it while he was claiming his wife was missing. At the end of the day, we had a little housekeeping outside the presence of the jury. The judge seemed fed up with the paperwork lag. The day ended with the judge scolding the attorneys for not sharing papers fast enough. Get it to her was the vibe. She didn't sound thrilled, and honestly, neither are we. We're back tomorrow at 9 a.m. with a voir dire of a Commonwealth witness, a little look-see at what he'll be testifying to, and more legal wrangling. Overall, for the prosecution, today was a science and shopping slam dunk. For Brian, it was a no-good, very bad day. The Commonwealth stopped playing Where in the World is Anna and started playing Here's Anna's Blood on Brian's stuff by painstakingly marching out the entire DNA unit, essentially the entire population of the lab. They built an unshakable scientific foundation that culminated in a devastating reveal. Anna's DNA was on the hacksaw, the hatchet, and most damningly, mixed with Brian's DNA inside the cuff of his elimination Tyvek suit. Then, just to twist the knife, they brought in home goods to show that Brian is the kind of guy who uses his missing wife's store credit to buy replacement rugs. The prosecution successfully painted a picture of a man who butchered his wife in the basement and then went bargain shopping to cover it up. For the defense, today was a mop and bucket maneuver. The defense is currently stuck playing whack-a-mole with a sledgehammer. Their strategy today was to create confusion through volume. Look at all the untested white powder. Look at the unopened peroxide. Look at the field notes we haven't seen. They're trying to suggest the investigation was sloppy and the crime scene was contaminated, hoping the jury will throw out the DNA baby with the bathwater. Their best moment was pointing out a third, unknown DNA contributor on a slipper, the mystery guest defense. But it's a tough sell when their client's DNA is marinating inside a bloody hazmat suit. They're fighting hard, but they're fighting an uphill mudslide. Well, that's all we have. So as always, love your family, love your pets, love your neighbors, and we'll see you next time.